Okay. Hello, everybody. How exciting is that? It's the last week of the term. I am super excited about that. Yeah. Not that I'm going to miss you guys, but this is a tough term. There are a lot of things happening in your life, in my life. So we are at the last week. I'm not going to introduce any new content today and on Wednesday. So really, this is sort of a space for us to maybe come back to some of the questions that you guys had earlier during the term, for me to calm you down a little bit, for you to freak out. So this is sort of the space for these kind of things. And today I brought with me some stuff, but we will open this up. So you will have the opportunity to ask some questions and so on. But what I want to do, I will talk you through some exam particulars. Again, I think we can, preempt a lot of this stuff by talking about it straightforwardly in a way. So I believe in transparency so that you know what you have to do and that these things can be preempted. And then I will come back to some of the topics that popped up earlier during this class. Remember we had a little survey at one time, so I just went back to some of the questions that you guys had there. But then, it's really open space, and then also for Wednesday, a similar thing. So Wednesday I will come back to some other stuff, to maybe some stuff that you guys will raise today. But on Wednesday we will also have our second big quiz, yet another big quiz, where we go back through some of the material that we had since the Easter break, right? So that's sort of the plan. Let's get started. Again, I want to know how many of you guys have looked at the exam preparation guide yet? It's funny that this week it seemed to be fewer people who had looked at it than last week when I asked the same question. But anyway, I cannot emphasize enough the exam preparation guide. That's really important for you guys. If you haven't done so yet, you need to have a look at this now. That's the time. I'm playing it slow this week. Also, just to give you some time. I know the exam is coming up, and time is the crucial factor here. But now it's really time for you guys to get started on this exam and start with the exam preparation guide. Right? So it's really useful. It's not just some made up stuff. This is sort of important. Get going with your preparation for this exam. Yeah. Okay. So before we start, some revisions that I had prepared. Let me get a feeling for what are the things that you feel that we should come back on Wednesday. As I said, Wednesday is an open day, so I'm very flexible with that. So what would be the useful things to come back to on Wednesday? Let me scroll down quickly. Let me scroll down quickly. Seriously, that shouldn't be discussed in public. Yeah, so. Oh, seriously, he does? I haven't seen it yet. Yeah. He comes back to life. I'm excited about this. Okay. If you have some more things, I think this survey is going to stay open for a little longer, so you can type things in while I'm talking about some of the stuff. Okay, some interesting questions. I might come back to some, not to others. Let's see. Let's see what we feel like. Last time I gave you some questions already, or you brought up some stuff. Let me go to this, which is kind of funny as well. I know you guys are all funny. So you really want to know about this beard, you know? Seriously, I had this beard for, I don't know, as long as I can remember. I think I started growing it when I was 17, 18, right? So that's kind of quite some time. Long before, I don't know, that's the thing, kind of when you kind of just stay with who you are and stay with what you do, and eventually, at some point, it might get cool, right? So that's sort of the thing. So just stay with who you are, and it will be fine. But if you paid close attention, there was actually an experiment during this term. There was a change in my facial hair. And so you could have tracked down how long it would have taken for this beard to grow. But anyway, so some other stuff. You had also asked me about the Manchester United story. You know, I did some research on this. Let me mention that again. Actually, this is some real research, and I just had a new paper that got published on this. Just came out a few weeks ago. The second one, where I look at the relational value of experience in teams. Basically, I showed that when you get to know your colleagues, you become better at what you do as a team. You know, it's nothing overly fancy, but I did that by looking at football teams, right? And Manchester United basically screwed up my PhD thesis. I was supposed to interview folks at Chelsea, qualitative interviews. I want to know about how teams work. You know, how do they play together, and how does the whole transfer issue come into this, and so on. And Manchester, it was the Champions League final. Manchester United won against Chelsea. Chelsea sacked the head coach, and I lost access to the team, and I became what I am now. So now I'm sort of do different kinds of research. But that was the Manchester United story. Just briefly, what else did you ask? Okay, some of you got confused. You know, as I mentioned, now let's become a little more serious here. This is absolutely fine. It's absolutely normal, right? The important thing is not to freak out. That's just how university life is. And when you look at why, you know, it's fascinating research, why, I don't know, people from certain class backgrounds, for example, are more successful at university, right? I think it's not because they are more intelligent or less intelligent. I think it's because there are different coping mechanisms of dealing with these situations where you feel overwhelmed. That's sort of the thing. So the key is to stay really calm. Stay calm and go ahead and do your thing and let your beard grow, and eventually, you know, it will get there. But how do people do that? So I'm very interested in some of my study. I look at what makes teams successful. Why are some people successful and others are not successful? So this is one of the things that, I don't know, little advice, life lessons that I want to give you, that I picked up at some point when I was studying. How do athletes do that? Some good athletes, how do they win Olympic gold medals? So this is Michael Phelps. Maybe some of you remember him. He's sort of the absolute, I think he won 18 gold medals in his life. He's a 7-time world champion in different disciplines and so on. So he's just incredibly, incredibly good. What do those guys do? You always see them with their headphones on. Why you always see, I don't know, when you see the 100 meters race, for example, folks walk in with their headphones on as well. So what's the point of this? Right? The point of this is to basically, in this exam situation, to just recreate what you've prepared for. That's sort of the key. It's not that there's sort of a special thing or anything. No, you prepare and then you just recreate the situation that you're in all the time. You practiced it, there's no thing, and then you just do what you did in your preparation. So once you're kind of then prepared, then the exam is really easy peasy. That's nothing, right? The only thing you need to then do is to recreate the situation that you are familiar with, right? To avoid these blackout things. Some people have that, some people more than others, but the key really is to stay calm and to get into this exam and just do what you always do. Just do what you prepared for, and then it's really no thing. So the key is once you're kind of prepared for this, and that's why I'm stressing this, with the exam preparation guide, but also now time to get started for this exam. Once you kind of got prepared for that, then the exam is really easy. There's going to be no surprise. I told you there's not going to be an exam with a surprise. There will only be stuff that we talked about in the lecture. Nothing should come as a surprise. So in that sense, once you prepare for what I tell you, you have nothing to freak out about. Okay. So really just stay calm and get prepared or do whatever you need to do. Yeah? People do different things to get into this zone, get prepared. Actually, funnily, for some very important exams, I used to shave. Once in a while, back in those days. And that was sort of my ritual. That was my ritual to kind of, get into this exam preparation mode where I knew, okay, this is just what I do, and there's nothing to freak out about. Okay. Let me go on and talk about some exam particulars. Just bringing these things up so that we all are on the same page, and I think a lot of questions can be avoided by talking about these things. Some of the things came up when I was talking with the tutors. When is the exam? Well, it is on the 11th of May, 3 o'clock in the RDS. Yeah. But you guys already know that. You get the information from the university. If you get conflicting information, the information from the university, that's the one that counts, right? If you have some special arrangements, there are always some special arrangement cases. You got informed by that as well, so that information that you received, that one counts. Okay. Where can you find help for these kind of things? Well, first of all, if you study, hopefully things going to be clear. I hope that at this point we are at a stage where things are clear. That's sort of my whole objective for this lecture, for this course, to be as clear as possible. That's what I tried, and to make it easy for you guys to have everything clear and everything understandable in a way. Funnily, some of my colleagues, they just have completely different strategies about these things. It used to be like that the hard part for the exam was go and get the notes that other people wrote, or get hold of the slides, and people are just completely protective and so on about that. So that's kind of what you spent 2-3 weeks on, just to hunt down that kind of stuff. And at the end, you didn't have any time to study for the exam, right? So I think that doesn't make sense in my eyes. So the material is all out there. You can go back and you can re-listen to what I said during the lectures. You get the exact wording. You have the slides in a way. So in that sense, you have the readings. In that sense, nothing will be a surprise. Right? Nothing will be a surprise. Exam preparation guide. For those of you who looked at it already, you know it. I put it on Blackboard, assignment syllabus. For those of you who haven't looked at it, now is the time to really look at it, read things closely, pay attention to what I say. I cannot say more than that. Okay, I already mentioned study groups. I'm a big fan of that. Not only to keep you on track with what you do, and kind of maybe resolve some of the issues that you might have, but also get the support around that, but also to answer some of the questions, right, that you might still have. I hope that by now we got them all, or that we nailed most of them. However, if there are some that are still out there about some practical issues, don't talk to me. I don't know this shit anyway. I don't know. I'm new to this place. All I can do is ask the undergraduate administrator anyway, right? And that's just going to take longer. I mean, you just ask her directly by yourself. So if you do have any administrative issues, talk to Deirdre Brophy. Her email address, deirdre.c.brophy@ucdie. She's our secretary in the School of Sociology, 4th floor. She's very nice, and she's very helpful. So if you do have any practical issues about the exam, talk to her. If there are some other issues that come up, your tutors by now. I hope that well, you should know who your tutors are, right? You spend considerable time with them, so they are accessible. And at the end, those guys will grade your exam as well, right? I'm just going to grade 20% of this exam. The other 80% are going to do the tutors, right? We will split this up, and each one of us will, focus on one question, and so your tutors can be very helpful as well. Or if there's something else, something more important that needs my intervention, then the tutors will contact me. So that's sort of the easiest way, and hopefully got this all sorted out. Well, I'm also mentioning that because at some point, I'm not going to be available anymore the week before the exam. I will be unreachable by email. I do these things. Get away from you. Actually, I'm going to be hiking somewhere in the mountains for, let's see, for how many 100 kilometers. But that's what I'm going to do. So even if I would want to answer your question, I just might not have an internet connection to reply to it, right? So get in touch with the administrators first and with the tutors, and they should be able to answer most of your questions anyway, right? And don't ask them for my phone number. Although they should know it. Anyway, so these are the guys to get in touch with. Yeah. But beyond that, well, you can find my details as well. Okay. Well, let me talk a few things about the exams. How it will look like. Now you will get points for different questions. By now, probably you will get up to 20 points for each one of the 4 questions that you will have to answer. I'll come back to the how many questions you have to do and these kind of things. There will be some points for overall quality in writing and structure as well, right? So that kind of matters. You can get extra points for the questions, and as I already outlined, the way we're going to implement that is that each question will be graded by the same person. So practically what's going to happen, we're going to split your exam into 4 parts. We put all the things in different piles. And then, the tutors and me, we have a party, we get drunk, and we get some stuff, and we're going to have a look at what you write. Yeah. So, what is the idea behind that? I noticed that actually it's a new way of doing things, but I pushed this through with the administrators. First of all, it makes our life much easier when we focus on one question each. But secondly, it's going to be the whole thing much fairer for you guys as well. Right? So we cannot say that some guys end up with one tutor who marks differently than another tutor who marks differently and so on. Because everybody, all 500, will be graded by the same guy on the same question. Right? So there's going to be a clear standard, and with that we avoid a whole lot of coordination issues and so on, and the whole thing should be much fairer for you guys as well. So that's the idea. Okay. Good exam always starts with having a close look at what is being written, and you would be surprised. That's sort of, as I said, people are nervous. Things happen. There's high pressure and so on. It's completely normal. But then you read over some stuff, and then you screw it up just because you didn't read correctly, right? Just because you didn't take the 5 minutes at the beginning to have a close look at the questions, at the instructions, and so on. I see this. Unfortunately, this happens all the time. I had a second year, my second year course students had to do some assignments, and I told them to give 3 examples and describe each one of them, right? And I still had a few candidates, 2, 3 guys, who ended up just describing one of them, right? Instead of all 3 that I asked them to do. And what can I do? There's a perfect description and scored full points, but I cannot give the guy points for the other 2 missing parts, right? So whatever you don't write, whatever you screw up because you haven't read the questions, I cannot give you any points for that. So that's sort of as simple as that. So let's have a look at that. Actually, this is sort of the title page of the real exam. Right? This is not the test exam anymore. It looks very similar, but this is the real exam. It's just the title page. Don't worry, there's nothing else coming here. So there's just the title page, but this is how it looks like. This is just how it is. Let's zoom in a little bit. What do we see here? First 2 hours. This is a 2-hour-long exam. What does that mean? Well, first it means you have some time at the beginning to actually look at your question. So take 5, I don't know, 10 minutes even, 2 hours is a good time to have a look at your question. Next, 2 hours, and there's going to be 4 questions. So you can split this up roughly. They're going to be, I don't know, half an hour for each question. Which brings us to the next point about how much should you write about these different questions, right? And people have different ideas about that. Some people just can write things very briefly, others write more about it. So it really depends. It really depends on how good you can describe things, how much into detail you can go. But obviously, the more you go into detail, the more points we can give you, right? That's as simple as that. That's as simple as that. When you write more stuff, I can find more stuff in there. As simple as that. But the key is to keep track of the time, right? So don't spend an hour on one question and then you realize, God, time is running away, because then what's going to happen? Then you might score full points on the one question, but there are still 3 other questions that you haven't answered, and the result is going to be a fail. Not because you're not good, well, in fact, you were perfect on the one question, but you ran out of time. Right? So that's sort of the thing. So it really depends on, I don't know, how quick you can write or what you can write and what you know in a way. But the key really is to keep track of time, right? And don't get this messed up. This can happen so easily, and it would be such a shame, if you know the stuff and you learned hard for this, and I really appreciate it in a way. But then we cannot give you the grade that would correspond to that, simply because you fucked it up and because you didn't look at the time and you couldn't get to answer all of the questions, right? Okay. So that's what I mean by that. Okay, answer 4 out of 6 questions. So you will be given 6 questions, and you can choose 4 out of them. You have to answer 4. You can choose which ones of those 6 questions that you will answer, right? So you can choose 4 questions. So if there's one question that kind of thinks, oh God, this damn validity stuff, I hate it, yeah? Or something else, and then you can say, okay, screw it, I'm going to ditch that question, I'm going to focus on the other ones. So you have some choice in here. 4 questions need to be answered. You won't get extra points if you answer more than 4 questions. But that's kind of the kind of stuff that I wrote in the exam preparation guide. They really help you to get your way through it. 4 questions need to be answered. Okay, next thing you find this one here. Use a separate answer booklet for each question. Clearly indicate the number of questions on the first page of your answer booklet. What does that mean? Well, you're going to go into the exam and you're going to get these booklets, right? The little pages from the invigilators to write in your answers. What we want you to do is to answer each question in a separate booklet, right? So at the very least, you will have 4 booklets with 4 different answers of your questions, right? Why are we doing this? I'm going to explain you why we're doing this, and hopefully then you understand it. So we'll, at the end, as I said, we're going to spread things out. We're going to put your questions on different piles, and then each question will be graded by one particular examiner, right? It might be me, it might be one of the tutors, and so on. This guarantees it's going to make the whole process much easier. There are 500 exams to grade. That's a lot of stuff. It's a lot of stuff. And this year in particular, there's time pressure on this, how to do this. And it will be much fairer for you guys as well. I hope that you understand that as well. It will be much fairer for you guys because each one of you will have the same guy grading a particular question. So in consequence, you need to answer the question on separate answer booklets. And each one of these answer booklets also make sure that you write your name and your student number on it. Because if these things get lost, again, then we cannot grade, we cannot give you points for stuff that we don't see. That we cannot clearly map to one of you guys. So that's the thing, right? So I know in other exams these things run differently, although back in the past I looked at some folks did it similarly here as well with these different answer booklets. I really hope this is working out. You're going to make everybody's life easier if you follow these instructions. Okay, lastly, it's goes without saying, fair play. It's the whole thing. We try to play fair here with this whole course or with the grading. We just expect nothing else from you guys as well. Right? But you are adults. Who am I to tell you these kind of things? Okay, let me talk a little bit about the grading stuff, so that you also know about, this can also help to understand how the whole thing will go. Well, first of all, I can only grade, I can only give you points for stuff that I can read. As simple as that. If I cannot read stuff, how am I going to decipher that, right? I speak a whole bunch of languages, but I don't speak that, for example, right? So English would be fine. English is absolutely fine. Yeah. Apparently Irish is not fine, you noticed I'm kind of really bad in pronouncing Irish names and these kind of things. So write clearly. Structure your answers as well. As I said, there will be points for that. How clearly you present stuff, how structured your overall argument is, and so on. I also brought some slides about the grades that you can get. But that's new stuff. You find that on the UCD websites as well. What is an A? What is a B? Right? What is a C, and so on. So there are very clear guidelines about that. Again, this is not stuff that we are making up while we are drunk with the tutors, although we will get drunk at some point. But these guidelines are very clear. These guidelines are very clear, and that's just the stuff that we are doing. So there's no magic here. There's no nothing that we don't know. At the end, it can help sometimes to understand what is happening here. You get a letter grade, but you also get some points, and these points eventually turn into some calculation points that will add up to your GPA, to the grade point average, and they're being translated and so on. So there's a whole bunch of stuff happening here at the background, but that's just the practical stuff. Okay, so I hope that I covered most of the stuff for the exam, but let me quickly have that one here. Do you guys have any other exam-related questions that we can address right now? Right now. If not, I will then continue and talk about some of the topics that came up before, but that's substantive stuff. That's not the particulars, the administrative stuff and so on. Is there anything on the administrative level that we haven't addressed yet? Well, how long should each answer be? That's sort of the thing. I'm dancing around that, but I don't want to freak you more out than you might be already. But I asked the tutors what they would say, and they said, okay, well, 2 hours divided by 4, that's 30 minutes each, so that should be a 2-page answer. That's what they said. Yeah. I'm a guy, I think my record stands with, in a 1-hour exam, I once wrote 38 pages, but I'm a little crazy, obviously. Yeah. So, but maybe a question you can answer it in a much shorter way, right? So actually, Corbett he suggested, okay, well, 2 hours divided by 4, that's 30 minutes each, so 2 pages, or how much you need to answer the question properly. Yeah. Okay. For people who get to the exam, how do we hand it in? Ooh, that's one of those questions that I don't know. So get in touch with Deirdre Brophy, our undergraduate administrator. Now I'm assuming you type in on a computer thingy, right? On a keyboard. It's kind of funny nowadays. Who does handwriting? Yeah? I sometimes write letters because I think it's nice. You know, if something is really important to me, I write a letter about it. But get in touch with Deirdre Brophy, our undergraduate administrator. She can help you about that. Sixth question is not a lot to choose from. Any clues? Well, you will have 6 questions, and you can choose 4. So that means you can teach 30% of the questions. I think that's a lot to teach. Yeah? I don't know. I was thinking about whether I should just give you 5 questions. You have to answer 4, but I opted at the end for giving you 4 questions because I think, I don't know, at the very least you should know 2/3 of the material very well, right? At the very least. But again, have a look at the exam preparation guide. Can we have class outside if the weather is good? Well, I wouldn't be opposed to that, but I think practicality is, If you tell me how we're going to manage 500 people outside, standing around somewhere with a working microphone and, I don't know. Maybe at a barbecue. There's going to be the UCD festival, and there's going to be a barbecue of the School of Sociology after that. So, you are welcome. I don't know what a tracker mortgage is. Do we need to write introduction and a conclusion? Do we need to write an introduction and conclusion? So it came up before. Is there an essay style required? Well, you have half an hour. You cannot really write a full essay in half an hour, right? But, as I said earlier, there's going to be some points for structure and the overall quality of your reply and so on. So if you can write an introductory sentence and a concluding sentence, that definitely helps in that sense. Yeah. But I'm not going to expect a full paper on you, right, where you have everything with headings and stuff like that. But it's always a good idea to have some introduction and some conclusion when you answer these kind of questions. All haters the type of structure for each question. Do we need intro and conclusion? Oh, seriously, it's your birthday. Happy birthday. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear student. Happy birthday to you. What do I do if I can't attend exam? Oh, that's a practical question that I don't know. Talk to the undergraduate administrator. They can help you that. Actually, what's going to happen if you don't attend the exam, I already had to hand these in. There's going to be a reset exam. There's going to be some other exams afterwards and so on. But out of experience, it always pays to be there for the real exam. The resitting exams will always be harder than the first one. That's just how it is. Carrion turns into dragon and kills the others. Okay, some of you are a little... What's on the exam? Can you answer the question in point form? What is analytical sociology? Well, there's a lecture on this. There's some more stuff on YouTube. Okay. Well, if anything else turns up, get in touch with the undergraduate administrators, especially these practicalities, I don't know, failing exam, or I don't know, or not sitting, or special circumstances, arrangements, and so on. Talk to the undergraduate administrator. Let's get started with some of the revisions. So I prepared some stuff that came up a while back. This whole issue of induction, deduction, and so on. That came up. So let me briefly come back to that. Okay. Well, these things really are concepts that got discovered in the philosophy of science, where people thought about how the hell do we know stuff, right? How do we get to the knowledge that we have? And then, these are 2 very basic principles, deduction and induction. They are related to different kinds of people, mostly deduction with René Descartes, induction with Francis Bacon, but there are also other folks. There's also Thomas Hobbes in there. And the idea with deduction is you know something is true, and because of that, you can deduce something else. So the famous quote that René Descartes had is, I think, therefore I am. Yeah, you might have come across that. in your philosophy class or somewhere else. I think, therefore I am. So René Descartes, he realizes, okay, apparently I'm thinking, right, because I find myself thinking right now, and because that is the case, I must exist. Yeah? So deduction is this idea that something is true, like a general principle, and from that you deduce something else. Something else that follows from the other thing, right? So the other thing is true, or if that is true, then then the other thing must be true as well. It's like deriving new knowledge by thinking about the implications and the consequences of the thing that you already know. That's deduction in a nutshell. Yeah, in a nutshell. Induction, in contrast, induction is this idea that you start with observations. You start with things that you observe in the world. You collect data, maybe through experiments or through surveys or whatnot, right? You collect information about the world, and then based from these specific observations, you try to make general conclusions. Right? So that's contrasting to that. So in a very simple way, in a very simplified way, you have general rules and you have specific cases. When you have some general rules and you deduce specific cases from that, then we call that deduction. Yeah. Deduction. When you have specific cases and you try to find general principles from these specific cases, then we call that induction. Yeah. So this is sort of the difference between deduction and induction in a nutshell. Well, I brought some more examples on that of the deductive and the inductive approach. So let's briefly talk about the deductive approach again. Now imagine, we want to think about what is the relation between the time you study for this exam and the grade that you guys are going to get at the end of the day. Right? So that could be something that we want to study. And based on a previous class that I taught, I just know that it's a general principle that folks who study more tend to get better grades. So that's sort of my knowledge that I already have from a previous class. Then I go and look at your guys' exams, I mark them, and then I find an empirical relationship. That's sort of now the graph in the middle. That's sort of this graph, right? Before, that's sort of my knowledge that I have before. That's sort of my general principle that I have, right? There's no data in here. That's my general principle that I have. I have this theory, okay, this is sort of how it is. Then I go out and then I collect the data. And that's sort of what I observe. Some guys will score higher points, some guys will score lower points. There will be some variation in the amount of studying that you put into this. It's data that I can collect. It's something that I observe in the real world. These are my specific observations. And now I link these two things together again, right? Then I kind of see my how well does my do my empirical observations basically match with the theories that I had before, right? So I deduce a general principle, and then I go and get some data to check if that actually is the case. So that would be some more deductive approach, by kind of going from the general principles to the specific cases. While induction, you start with the specific cases. So there I would start with the data that I collect, right, at the end of the exam, and that's sort of what I see, and then I look at it for a while with the tutors, and then we think, there seems to be a relationship there. But you see how it's sort of a different approach here now, right? So I see, okay, I start with my empirical specific cases, and then I kind of try to induce general principles from that, and it seems to be this thing, that there is sort of a relationship between the amount of times that people spend studying for the exam and the grade that they get, and then at the end, I have new knowledge in the form of a general principle that I induce from my specific observations. Right? But essentially, it really is, in a nutshell, there we go, this kind of thing. You have the general rules, and you have the specific cases, and when you go down from the general rules to the specific cases, you deduce something, you use deduction, while in contrast, when you go up from the specific cases to the general rules, you use induction. Okay, then there are also problems of induction. Remember, that's one of the stuff that you talked about in one of the assignments. I think it came up there. when you think this through, induction, okay, we have specific observations and we try to make general claims based on that. What are problems here, or what is sort of problematic in that? And once you understand that, you also already understood falsifiability, essentially, yeah? Because it could be, I don't know, that your observations were just not as encompassing, as full as they would have needed to be in order for you to see that maybe what you thought is true is not really true. Maybe you just didn't look at enough people. Maybe if you would have looked at a different group of people, the result would have been very different, right? So maybe you were limited in your number of observations, right? I could say, I don't know, the last week I think it didn't rain. I could say based on that, it never rains in Ireland. You see how this can be wrong, right? I don't know. Let's see. But most likely it will rain at some point. So if I would have looked at more days, or maybe at more days in the past, or more days into the future, then eventually I will realize that there will be some rain at some point. And that's sort of the major problem of induction, that you can be limited in your observations. The second one, and that's kind of closely related to David Hume, he says that for induction, you basically assume, let's say you have some specific cases where you collect some information on, and then you induce general principles from that. But what you're basically assuming is that the future will work exactly as the past, right? Maybe, but maybe that's not the case. Maybe your general conclusions about the population in Ireland hold right now, based on the Generation What survey, right? But maybe next week something happens that really changes how people think and so on. So then your inductions don't really hold true anymore. So you see how when you kind of make inductions from specific cases to generalize from that, you're implicitly assuming not only that you looked at enough cases, but you're also assuming that that the future will work as did the past. Yeah. So these are the problems of induction that are related to that. But feel free to read up more on this kind of stuff. Actually, on induction, I put up another reading on Blackboard, something from one of those popular science books that you come across at an airport, and I thought it was interesting. It was an interesting read by Nassim Taleb. You know, the guy, he wrote a book called The Black Swan, which is very much related to that. So it's a small chapter that you find on Blackboard. I put it up there. Okay, we also talked about parsimony, falsifiability. That was another thing. Falsifiability, let me briefly come back to that. You know, that's basically this idea. As Karl Popper was this philosopher of the social science who had this brilliant, genius idea about how can we deal with that problem of induction? How can we deal with this thing that maybe there are some things out there and we didn't look enough. We just didn't look at enough cases. We just didn't capture. We didn't find the black swans yet, and because of that, we think that all the swans are white. So he had this idea. Hang on, maybe we cannot prove something that is true because of that, because we haven't looked enough observations yet or enough cases. But what we can do, we can with absolute certainty, we can disprove something. We can show when something is false, right? If I'm saying it never rains in Ireland, all we need is to wait until it rains one day, and then this statement is refuted. And there's no discussion about that anymore, it's just clearly refuted. That's something, that's falsifiability. That's this idea of falsifiability. So Popper then says, well, instead of trying to prove stuff in the world, what we actually should do is try to disprove stuff. Because the knowledge that we generate through that approach, that's real knowledge. The other stuff, he says, actually that's knowledge that is far less powerful than when you disprove something. Because you still don't know. Maybe, I don't know, if somebody else would look at a different sample. Maybe if somebody else looked at some other people and so on, the result would be different in a way. Right? But falsifiability, when you disprove something, you can say for sure that you disproved it, right? So you can think of this in the case of the swans. You know, if I say that all the swans in the world are white, as soon as I find just one single black swan, this statement is clearly refuted. So that means our knowledge increased because now we know that not all swans in the world are white. Yeah? That's sort of this idea of falsifiability. Well, there was also this hypothetical deductive model and so on, but that stuff I might talk about on Wednesday. But let me also have a look at what you guys came up with earlier, the real stuff that you came up with, so I will have a look at that. And on Wednesday, it's going to be our last session. I come back to some of these things, and we'll have another quiz. Right? Okay, well, have a good time. See you on Wednesday.